Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
This understanding that you never have the perspective that another person has on you. Like you can't.
Are you a teen or adult looking for more happiness in every day and ways to connect with people in your life?
You've come to the right place. Hack Your Happiness is a podcast designed to bring you the behind the scenes of what brings iconic individuals happiness, plus their life hacks.
I'm Mercedes.
And I'm Anastasia.
And we're the two teens behind Small Bits of Happiness.
We're interviewing Olympic athletes, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and more.
Throughout all of our episodes, you'll find great conversations, hacks that you can take away and try in your life, inspiration, as well as unique and surprising insights. Today, we're speaking with Angela Duckworth. Angela Duckworth is a very well-renowned psychologist who studies the concepts of grit and perseverance. She is the Rosa Lee and Egbert Chang Professor at the University of Pennsylvania, faculty co-director of the Penn-Wharton Behavior Change for Good initiative, and faculty co-director of the Wharton People Analytics. Angela has advised the U.S. Department of Education, the World Bank, NBA and NFL teams, and Fortune 500 CEOs. Angela's TED Talk is among the most viewed of all time. Plus, her book Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance is a #1 New York Times bestseller. Angela is also co-host of the podcast No Stupid Questions. We are so thrilled to be speaking with her today. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be talking to you both.
Before we get into this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, we just want to quickly say, check out our happiness wellness products designed by us for individuals of all ages to help you bring a small bit of happiness to your home with our tangible tips and tools. Check them out in the show notes.
We're so excited to be talking with you today.
Yes, we're so excited. You are such an iconic female author and scientist, but take us back to the beginning. How did your journey start?
Well, my mom and dad came to the United States from China, and my dad was really ambitious and he talked about achievement all the time. I mean, all the time. And so I just grew up thinking about achievement a lot, and I still am, I guess, obsessed with excellence. I love watching the Olympics, and I, look in the newspaper, every year to see who won the Nobel Prize. And I love excellence. And I guess I will say I became a psychologist in part so that I could understand better, something my dad would say all the time is that, some people really are gifted, and it's their talent that is so marvelous and what sets them apart. And when I grew up, and I started doing research, I really wanted to know about all the things that were not whatever it is that is your innate talent that make you excellent at what you do.
I love that.
Yeah, it's so cool how, your childhood and your teenagehood kind of formulates you and brings up your interests that you end up pursuing later on. And I think that story about your dad kind of inspiring even now, how you're so interested in like Olympics and the Nobel Prize, along with all of your amazing work, of course, is so cool.
But I do need to tell both of you, since you're considerably younger than I. When I was your age, it's true. There are some things that haven't changed, but I do want to say that I was a completely ditzy cheerleader when I was your age, and really wanted to be popular and thought about it a lot. Anyway, I've also changed, so I would say that change is a constant. So I am still obsessed, but in many ways, I'm changing my mind about a lot of things.
I love that because I think sometimes as teens we can get worried and we're like, oh, like I really want to be popular. Does that mean that, I don't care about anything else?
Yeah,
and so hearing
like
that
the movie
from
stereotype.
Exactly. But I think hearing that is very reassuring, and also, it's okay to be a teenager and want things that a teenager wants, and also then, explore your other interests at the same time. And let yourself live in the present moment.
I fully agree. I mean, your journey sounds so amazing. You've gone through so many different changes, as well as just growing and becoming a new person, and you've achieved so much. What do you think the most difficult thing that you've ever encountered on your journey, and how did you overcome this?
Gosh, I had a good friend named David Mecaton. He was a high school teacher, and we collaborated, not when I was in high school, but we were doing research together. And he used to say to his students, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days, and life is making something out of both of them. So thinking about what David said to his students and answering your question, Well, I think the most recent of these, like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. I don't even know if I'm going to get through it. Episodes for me was, so I'm working on this new book and I haven't written it yet, and it was due actually a year ago. Well, it's due like 8 months ago, and I took a whole year off from teaching. So, that's called a sabbatical for professors, and I didn't have to go to faculty meetings, and honestly, I didn't have to do anything but work on my book. And I worked so hard. I worked 7 days a week. I, got up before dawn and I did nothing else but work on this book until, sometimes past midnight. And you would think that after all of that effort, I would have produced a book on deadline. But the harder I worked, the worse it got. I was like, I don't know. It was just sort of, I was like kind of knowing more, and like more and more words were in the document, but it was not a book. And it was definitely not a book I would put my name on. So your question is a really good one, because I don't have to go very far back to think of a time where, I said out loud to my husband, I think I should retire. And he was like, oh, what do you mean? And I was like, I mean, retire. Like, I really don't think I'm very good at this. So I think we can all catastrophize, including me. And I will say, in terms of what I learned from that and how I got through it. I was recently talking to my therapist, because I have a therapist. Her name is Dee. And I was talking to her about that time, sort of looking back now with like a year perspective. And she said, well, you know what you had? You had handholds. You had Jason. You have a good relationship with your mother. You have these, girlfriends that you call each week. You have these collaborators, and they were telling you, don't retire. It's not the end of the world. Actually, the book's not as bad as you think it is. So I will say that my take home from all of this is, honestly, everybody has bad days, and some of them are really bad, and some of them get strung together into bad months and sometimes into bad years. But I think what every person needs is something that is outside themselves, these handholds, if you will. I think she was talking about like being on a climbing wall or something. But anyway, I think everyone does need these handholds. And as somebody who studies grit, I want to tell you and all of your listeners that, it's a myth to think that strength comes from inside, at least exclusively. I think so often when I've had a really bad day, there is nothing inside left. And so what I need is somebody else. And those are the metaphorical handholds that I think have gotten me through all of my bad days.
For sure. I think that oftentimes we think, oh, grit is you and you need to like tough it out, keep quiet, and just keep going.
Right.
But oftentimes I think grit comes from the support of other people.
And that's why it's so important to surround yourself with people who lift you up and make you feel your best. And I really love how, you share such great, incredible advice about, that it's okay to look for support in others.
For sure.
Because I think a lot of the times we are worried that if we share our weaknesses with other people, they'll judge us and see us as weak for that, even though that's the opposite of what seeking support is. And also, I love the metaphor of like the climbing wall and like holding on to our supports and looking for those. I think metaphors are such a
My husband likes that metaphor because he actually does go bouldering or whatever you call it when you.
Yeah, I also think that when you are focusing on something like writing a book or doing well in school or doing good in a sport, you often are so much harder on yourself and you don't see your own success. So having somebody else to edit it or tell you how you're really doing, give you an outsider look in and an outsider perspective can be so incredibly helpful.
I'm not saying that everybody has to like rush out and get a therapist immediately, but I do think having this understanding that you never have the perspective that another person has on you. Like you can't, right? I mean, you can't see from the outside what you're experiencing from the inside. So yeah, I'm going to try not to forget that lesson anytime soon.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, sure. And it's so easy sometimes to give other people advice, but not take it yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think oftentimes that might happen a little bit.
Yes. How's your book going now?
Better. So what happened? Let's see. So, well, first I should tell you, I quit. I really did. I mean, I tried and tried. I cried and cried. I tried more. I cried more. And then I quit. I told my editor that I quit. He was kind of astonished. He was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I can't do it. Like, I've tried everything I can do, and I don't think this book can be written, at least by me. So I fully quit. And then I, kind of went back to like my usual job, right? I was doing research and thinking about all the things that a professor thinks about. And then about a month later, I just found myself, my mind wandering back to the book. And I would be thinking like, oh, you know what a better table of contents would be? I think, and like, oh, I think this point should be made this way. So then I was thinking, well, I don't want to like go back to the book because that was so traumatizing. And it was like a cave with a lion in it. And I'm like, I think I know what's in that cave. I think I better walk around the cave and not poke my nose in. But, every day I would walk a little closer and I would open up the Google Doc that I was working in and take a peek at what I was working, and then I would close it. And then the next day I would look and I might actually write a word. And so finally I unquit, and that was over the summer. And I think one of the things that I hope I don't forget, because we all learn lessons, but then we forget some of them. So one way that I hope to be in the future is that I think that I got really tense. And for me, it was like, oh my gosh, it was like choking on a test. It was like, oh my gosh, it's like with every passing moment, I got more tense and more panicked. And I think one thing that I hope to do is to chase excellence. I'm so into excellence, but also just to relax a little. Like part of me is like, okay, get over yourself. It's a book. Okay, if it's a great book, it's a great book. If it sucks, well, that sucks too. But like the world will keep spinning. I mean, you're just one person writing one book. There's so many people and so many books. So having that perspective, which we were just talking about, but just like I think like maybe, relaxing a little bit, and not taking myself too seriously is something I'm hoping to hold on to.
I love that so much, because you're right. It's important to take a step back, and sometimes you can quit, take a break, and then come back and look at things with a new perspective, and things just fall into place a little bit better.
And if you're like forcing it, you're sitting there and you're like, I need to write 100 words in 10 minutes. You're not going to be able to accomplish that because you're trying to force the words. Like they should be more flowing out of you instead of, you trying to like push something up that's not there.
Yeah.
I mean, I will tell you as a writer, because you have to write, right? Every student has to write. And I want to say that like, I mean, sometimes the sentences will flow, but it's not that it's easy. But let me just tell you one little story. So around, 2 months before I quit, when things were really dark and heavy and terrible, and like the dumpster fire of my sabbatical year, as I sometimes call it, I had a really good friend. Her name is Julie. And she was like, Ange, let's take a day and just relax and go for a walk and, drink coffee. And I was like, Julie, I can't. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I can't take a day off. It's like being on a sinking ship and someone's like, I don't know, let's play Adele. It's like, wait, are you kidding? It's like like there's an emergency. And I think now looking back, it's like, okay, if your best friend says, hey, like, can you relax for an afternoon? Can we do something different? And if you are kind of like white knuckled, are you kidding? That's the most ridiculous thing. Like, I have to study for my AP exams right now, or fill in the blank. I think for me, I'm just going to try to remember, like, if a good friend or somebody who knows me well says like, hey, can you take a little bit of time away from what you're doing? I mean, a really short amount of time. And if I can't do it, I think it's a warning sign that I am in some, like hole where I'm not like having the proper perspective.
I think that's so smart for everyone to pay attention to. Like, if you're in a cycle where you can't get out of it, in terms of like constantly worrying about something, thinking about something, then it's a sign even more so that it's important to break that cycle. Because, and I love that, like, the introspection that you have, like the ability to look back and see, hey, I learned that and bring that. And I think
that's a really amazing
it's important
ability.
to be able to critique ourselves and build on ourselves. And you talked about how, your grit, and that, grit can sound like it's a very tough word, and that you've studied grit a lot. So I'm just really curious, what inspired you to study and research the concepts of grit and of perseverance?
Well, I do. I mean, it is named, I don't know what it's named after. Honestly, I do not know where the word grit comes from. I have extensively researched it. I think it's from like some old English word, but it sure sounds like I mean, it sounds like gritting your teeth and forcing yourself to do something. The reason I chose that word is because there is something that I think I will stand by no matter what, because it would be really hard to convince me otherwise. It's just not possible to do anything great without a tremendous amount of effort. I mean, we're having this kind of effortless conversation, but like, how much work did you have to put into just this, very short conversation? I remember very recently seeing Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, this is days ago. He was doing this talk on stage, and he said, "When I was a young boy, I really liked to laugh, and I would watch these comedians, and what did I know? I just thought they were funny. It's like I thought a comedian, like, I don't know, they're funny and they told jokes." He's like, "Now I know that that joke has been revised hundreds of times. It's been practiced thousands of times." So I will say that I study grit, which has some useful connotations and some maybe not so useful connotations, because it is passion and perseverance over very long periods. And I just don't think that either of you or me or anybody else or Jerry Seinfeld, can ever do anything truly excellent without all of that effort. And so I hope that's not a contradiction to all the other things that we said. Like, you need handholds, you need to be vulnerable, you need to be like, oh my gosh, I think if my best friend says like we should take a walk and I'm freaking out, maybe that's a sign that I have somewhat lost perspective. Like, maybe I need to see a therapist. Maybe I need to, do something that gives me that perspective. So I hope I don't think it's a contradiction, but that is what grit is. That is why I study it. And I have yet to meet the high achiever who disproves the hypothesis that excellence comes from a tremendous amount of sustained, concentrated hard work.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I don't think it's a contradiction, because life is all about balance. Like, you need to be able to take breaks, of course, and relax.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to put in the work and be passionate and fight through those moments where you might not feel the most motivated. Because I personally really believe, like, discipline over motivation. Like, we're not going to always be feeling motivated, but we have to be able to push through. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that subject, but
well, okay, so what's the mantra? Discipline over motivation. Well, first let me ask you, Anastasia, like, do you have the same mantra?
Yeah, for sure. I think that both of us kind of share that, especially with our work ethic. We just kind of make sure to focus on consistency, but still with a little bit of balance.
You like wake up, you don't feel like doing it, but you're like, we're gonna do it. Like,
personally, I love what I do.
Yeah,
there's definitely moments where I'm like, especially with school more so, where I'm like, I really don't want to study for my science midterm, but if it's tomorrow, I kind of have to, or if it's coming up soon, I kind of have to.
So like, let's probe that a little bit. Do you love or do you not love that? Like, so for both of you, so what are you talking about when you say like discipline over motivation? Because I want to understand that. And then of course I have something to say about it, but I first want to understand it.
I think for me, discipline, like, for me, it's like I can't always be super excited. Like, if I only were to study when I'm feeling super excited, because sometimes I'm like, I wake up and I'm like, you know what? I kind of feel like going over that slideshow today, and I kind of feel like reading over my notes. Like, I do have those days, and those are awesome. But some days, and I think most students can relate to this, you just really don't want to. You really don't want to work on that project. You really don't want to review your notes, but you kind of have to, and it's that discipline of knowing what you have to do and doing it. And then there are rewards that you'll probably do better on your test if you review not only on those moments where you feel like it.
Yeah, mine's very similar, but also like on the athletic side, because I definitely also like to work out and make sure that, we're being active and moving.
What's your sport?
I don't do sports, but I work out at home.
She likes to run.
Work out like an old person, like how I work out, like just to be healthy.
Yeah,
she works out, so she does good on her fitness and her gym class at school.
But just making sure that like I continue to do that, because I know that sometimes if you take like long breaks from it, you start to become kind of uncomfortable with starting to do it again. And so what I like to do is just make sure to consistently do it, even if it's sometimes at a little bit less of like an intense level, just to make sure I'm just constantly moving, I'm constantly running. What I do is on Mondays, I run Mondays and Fridays, I do less intense, and then the rest of the week I do a lot more intensive running.
Okay, so loved your work ethic, both of you. I love that you use this word discipline, because I think discipline is a great word. But here's the but, or the caution. What I have found is that sometimes when we grow up and we're like, I'm the hard worker, I'm the person who's going to be consistent. And we might even think that there are these stories, true stories, like Michael Jordan with 100 and whatever fever, like, but he delivers, like he has, like he like, so I'm going to be that person. So I love that in many ways. But here's the but, here's the comma, but I have also found that sometimes it is those exact hardworking, disciplined, work ethic first people. And in that, I kind of include myself, because I see a lot of who I was, despite the ditzy cheerleader part, but I was actually also a reasonably hard worker when I was young and in high school and then into college. I think there was a lesson I learned a little too late. And it's like the next level, which is like, okay, sure, be a hard worker. And you always want to ask yourself, like, what is the path of least resistance so that I can work my hardest on the path of least resistance? So let me give you an example from exercise, because somewhere back here, I have this book. I was talking to this guy, Alex Toussaint. He's one of the most popular Peloton instructors. And we were having this conversation because he trains not only civilians, but also professional athletes. And he said, one of the things that's really hard to get across to people is work really hard, but take the path of least resistance. And here's what we mean. And it is a little next level. It is something that I didn't really figure out until I was much older than you, but I would like you to figure it out earlier. So say, for example, you're like studying for a standardized test, your final exam, or you're like working out, or you, of course, want to put in maximal effort. And yes, you're right. You need to be consistent. And yes, you're right. Some days you may not feel it. He says, and it's hard to believe, he's like the best, he's like the most physically fit human I've possibly met in person. But he's like, sometimes I'm not feeling it, right? Or I'm tired or whatever. And you do need discipline. But here's the big lesson that he and I hope you will learn a little earlier than later. It's that when we talk about the path of least resistance, we're like, yeah, but like of all the things that you could do for exercise, pick the thing that you most love, pick the Peloton instructor that you most love, like, find a routine where like studying for your exam, okay, it's going to be hard. One way or the other, it's going to be hard, but like, is it more fun when you're drinking mint tea? Like, do you work best in the morning versus the evening? Would you massively benefit from talking to your history teacher after class instead of just like grinding through, like you're chewing through concrete, trying to understand something you don't understand? So both Alex and I are also hard workers like you. But I just think it's a big, it happens to almost every hard worker that it's like the only trick they know. And so, I'll tell you a true story. So my husband and I, earlier in our marriage, he was raised as a hard worker. I was raised as a hard worker. And when our kids were very young, it was like the real estate crisis that I don't even know if you ever heard of. But anyway, it doesn't matter. There was a financial crisis in this country, and he was a real estate developer, and it was not a good time financially for his company. And his only trick, his only card in the deck was work harder. That's all he knew. It was like, try harder, work harder, wake up earlier, go to bed later. And he just did that. And it's very similar to what I was doing with my book. It's like, dig deeper. And it led actually to something of a crisis for him, then for me. And, then there was lots of therapy. But like, I think one of the things that a hard worker has to learn is, am I on the path of least resistance? Or is there something that I'm missing? Because if you've got your head down and you're like one foot in front of the other, you could be like missing this like smooth, straight path that's like right next to you. So I think that's what Alex means. He thinks it's hard for even a professional adult athlete to learn. He tries to say this, in a million ways. I try to say this to remind myself, but especially to young, ambitious, hardworking, disciplined people, I hope you learn earlier than later that some amount of agility and some amount of, am I putting in too much effort almost is like a question that you want to periodically ask yourself.
I love that. That's such great advice.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something Anastasia and I will definitely take
For
away
sure.
from speaking with you today. And I hope that our listeners do too, because I think so many teens and individuals of all ages can benefit from that, and like just doing what works, and sometimes maybe trying to find out like that easier hack to something and trying different strategies, seeing what works best, and obviously not like slacking off and giving up, but just like balancing it out is so important. And we're coming up on the end of our time here, but I really want to ask you something. I want to ask you, what do you like to do every day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
Oh, I love this question. Well, one thing I realized recently is I really like to walk. And I remember telling someone, they were like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just like walking. I mean, if you had an errand to run, I could run it for you. Like, I just like super love walking around." And another, so I try to do that more. And another thing I just learned, which is kind of cool, I was like on a podcast talking to some former executive from Apple. His name is Guy Kawasaki. And he was like, "Oh, have you ever read this book, The Artist's Way?" "No, Guy, I've never read The Artist's Way." He's like, "Oh, then you don't know about morning pages." And I was like, "Say more. Like, you have me at morning. Like, what's morning? What are morning pages?" He was like, "Well, this book was written by an artist, and it was kind of a self-help book about how to be more creative." And then, Guy knows I'm writing a book. He was like, "Maybe it would help you with your book." And I was like, "Well, how's it work?" He was like, "Well, every morning you wake up, and I think this book was written long ago that nobody even thought that you could do this electronically. It was just like you get a journal. I personally feel like I've been doing this now for a couple months, and I personally think that like pencil and paper, pen and paper are better than iPad or phone. But you basically write for 4 minutes. No, it's not 4 minutes. It's like 4 pages. I think it's 4 pages. And it's not exactly a journal. Like you could write stuff in it like, "Oh, I feel bad about what I said to my friend." Well, you could write whatever you want, but it's 4 pages. And that means that you have this moment where you're writing and you're like, "Yeah, I don't have anything else to write." And you're like, "Oh, wait, I just thought of something." So I've been doing morning pages, and that's bringing me a little bit of joy. And also, it is helping me write my book.
It's so great to kind of just let your mind wander and just put it out on paper. And I agree, putting like a pen or a pencil down on a sheet of paper has so much benefit.
I know that I love to journal. I have this beautiful journal that my dad got for me that I absolutely love, and so I try writing in it as much as I can. And on top of that, I love having like physical journals that you can look back on as memories and saying, "Oh, look, this is what I did today," or "This is how I was feeling this morning." And it's just so cool to be able to relive your life, because I remember times I was a really big journaler when I was in like first grade, and just looking over all those, it just reminds me of memories that I genuinely thought I forgot, but it just
Second grade handwriting.
Exactly.
It's
a little bit brutal, but
yeah,
you just gotta.
Exactly.
So where can our audience find you if they want to keep up with your work and find out when your book comes out, etc.?
Okay, well, I have an ambivalent relationship with social media because I think it's not good, especially for people your age. I do have a Twitter account, which is now called X, and LinkedIn, but you probably don't use LinkedIn because I think that's the next stage of social media when you're really old and boring and use social media to find jobs. And I might be on Instagram, but I think maybe there's on Facebook. I will say this. If you go to angeladuckworth.com, or characterlab.org. Those are two websites. They are not social media, but I try to put up everything that I can that would be free for, people like you who want to, be excellent and also develop other strengths of character that have you kind of set up for leading a good life.
I love that so much, and definitely we will link the websites in the show notes so anyone who's interested can easily access them and check them out. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been so amazing talking to you.
So inspiring.
Oh my gosh, I loved this conversation. I love your energy. And I hope you continue to work hard, ask questions, and also don't work too hard.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, we're big like puzzlers.
We love to puzzle.
We have like a giant puzzle upstairs. It's like 1,000 pieces, and we'll be like, sometimes we'll be working really hard, and my mom will be like,
"Let's take a puzzle break.
It's time to puzzle." And so we'll just head over to like the dining room on the floor and just.
We've done 3 puzzles in the past 3 weeks.
Yeah, over spring break we completely puzzled. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's terrific. I think if there were more puzzles and less social media, the world would be a better place.
I agree. And definitely, like, I know there's, like, digital puzzles, but the physical puzzles are the best.
Let's get back to IRL. I think I don't know. I don't want to go to the metaverse. I want to be more in this verse.
Totally, in the present moment, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, and thank you so much to Angela Duckworth for joining us today.
She's so incredible and inspiring, and I loved all of her advice, especially how she talked about being a hard worker, putting in the work, and how you're not going to get to your goals, at least not be super successful at them without that hard work. But the importance of also taking breaks and the importance of taking the path of least resistance. Anastasia, what was your biggest takeaway today?
I think, again, the path of least resistance, it can be so easy to say, what's the hardest path? I'm going to follow that and I'm going to be successful.
Because I think oftentimes we associate success with hard work, and we associate hard work with feeling like we're giving all of ourselves
and almost feeling a little bit burnt out. But I think that, just taking the route that is, study smarter, as well as taking the route that you might enjoy a bit more, but is still getting work done. You may still have to, grind it out, but you're still somewhat enjoying it. You're still feeling passionate about it, and it doesn't just feel like work. What about you, Mercedes?
I absolutely agree, and one of my favorite and biggest takeaways from Angela today was I think how her advice applies to all aspects of life: school, extracurriculars, sports, goals, writing a book, applying to post-secondary school, etc. Because I really think that her idea and her concept of working hard towards your goal is so applicable, because of course we need to take breaks and take the path of least resistance. But I also think that sometimes in our society we can get into the idea of seeing people on social media, seeing them have all of this success and thinking they're just lucky. It will never happen to me because I'm not lucky. I'm not like him. I'm not like her. I'm not like them. They get to run this company. They get to have all these followers. They get to publish a book. But I'm not lucky. But I really think that it's, knowing and understanding that those people have worked so hard, and we also need to put in that work.
It is all about balance.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening, because it really helps us out and we really appreciate it.
Also, be sure to join our happiness family, and it really helps us out, and we'd love to have you. It's completely free, and you can do that by following Hack Your Happiness on whichever listening platform you're on now.
See you next time!